One thing I will say, though, is obviously I do like to talk too much. Kate, I imagine you probably have a similar problem having so many interesting things to say. So this time, if you have questions, raise your hand throughout, and we'll try to address you. If you're over here, stage right, I'm a little blocked, so stand up, wave your hands around, get our attention. To start off, Kate, you work with the Library of Congress. What do you do there?
I'm the Director of Digital Strategy, so my job is to help the agency think through how digital innovation can help us accomplish its mission.
So, what does digital strategy have to do with a bunch of books?
Well, that's a great question. So as the digital world has evolved, so has our mission hasn't changed. But our mechanisms for providing those services and also the items that we're collecting have evolved. For example, we were promised a Fireside Chat today, but they don't let us actually light fires here. But I did bring this an image from our collections of a woodstone fireplace. This was a photograph taken as part of our American Folklife collection to document American folklife, and is now available online at lsu.gov. So we have this strong digitization program to scan tangible items in the collection to provide access to the American public, but also we're beginning to collect items that are available only in digital form. So we have a really big web archiving collection, and we archive social media in various forms. So it's a really exciting time to be in libraries.
Yeah, and I feel like that opens up an entirely new aspect of what libraries do, right? The traditional library is a storehouse of knowledge, but its knowledge in the past has always been, a monk somewhere, copying a book, or a scholar writing a book, or somebody producing something that then ends up in a library. With the digital born, there's still some of that, obviously, but a lot of what you do, I imagine, has to do with relative amateurs creating content. How do you take in digital-born material from the average citizen?
Oh, so there's a couple of good things that your question kind of brings to mind. And one is that libraries are not a hole for dropping books into. They have always been lively centers of scholarship. And I think what the value proposition in libraries are the people. So our librarians are staff that understand the collections and the research problems in the areas very well. So the way that we provide services to citizens has historically been very face-to-face. So somebody comes into the reading room, we talk to them about their research question, we give them different resources that they could consult. And with digital innovation, we've been able to make distance work for us. So we have the Ask a Librarian program. So anybody can send an email to one of our librarians asking for help about using our collections. And our reading rooms are open, by the way, to anybody over the age of 16. So please come in and do some research. But we're also working on other ways to engage citizens. So an example of that is our crowdsourcing work. So we have begun to think about how people could contribute their knowledge and understanding to the collections. And that started about 10 years ago when we launched the Flickr project to put prints and photographs collections online and allow people to make comments, which are then evaluated by our librarian staff and incorporated into the catalog. And we're sort of thinking about other ways we can engage the public in adding their knowledge to the collections as well. So we just launched Beyond Words, which is a crowdsourcing project that invites people to describe and caption images from historic newspapers. And that lends a greater findability to the collections, but also what I find very exciting about it is it invites curious people into the collections in a way that they've never been invited in before.
Right, and you get that classic, we spoke about this before, you get that classic, as soon as someone engages with an agency, an organization, what have you, they start to produce more, right? If they produce, then they consume more, and you just get this snowball effect of participation and engagement.
Right, a virtuous cycle. And so you asked about, the work of regular people, and I think a lot of people think of the Library of Congress as a fancy place for fancy people, filled with the ideas of fancy folks. But we have historically had a huge, strong collection of about the lives of regular Americans. So I mentioned the American Folklife Center, which works to document American folklife. We have the Veterans History Project, which invites veterans to submit their told stories about their experience. but through social media especially, and web archives, so that we have these great programs archiving science blogs and archiving the culture of the web. And I think what's so exciting about that is it helps people understand that it's a place for them. So if their thoughts and ideas can be collected at the library, then they're welcome to come use it. And as you mentioned, the snowball effect, I like to call it the virtuous cycle. So if someone comes in and they use something that one of our collections and services to make something, then we can help amplify that work. So we encourage people when they're using our APIs or other collections to tweet at us, and that we can, retweet the things that they're talking about, or maybe write a blog post about it, and hopefully that inspires other people to make tools and creations that are like that.
So outside of specific initiatives like the veterans one, for instance, but in a more general sense, if I have something and I say, you know what, I think this belongs in the Library of Congress because I took the greatest photo ever, what's the route for that? Would it be to tweet at the Library of Congress? Is there a submission portal that people use?
So that would be a phone call probably. Okay. So if you are going through your grandparents' attic and you find this treasure trove of letters between your grandmother and some famous scientist about their work, call the manuscript division. We get submissions like that all the time.
Excellent. Because I imagine you can't just let things just come in, right? You can't just have a flood of stuff coming at the library. Libraries are based on the idea that you can find information, right? So with all this coming in and just the incredible influx of that the data-driven world has for information, how do you keep track of everything?
That's such an interesting question, because this false dichotomy between the analog past and the digital future is really a pervasive frame that we think about this in. But really, they're together. They're one collection, and books keep coming. So we are publishing more books than ever before, and through the U.S. copyright deposit and demand programs, we get about I think it's like 3,000 to 6,000 volumes at the loading docks every day that our acquisitions librarians go through and determine what to add to the collection. So all of that is on top of the digital stuff that we're also trying to collect. Cataloging, we have some of the world's best catalogers at the library, and they work to describe collections so that they can be findable. But in the volume of information available in the digital age, we have to think creatively about how to make those things findable. So I think we have to think about crowdsourced transcriptions and machine learning and AI in ways that we can fit those three things together to form a cohesive program to make sense of our information universe.
You talk about your crowdsourcing initiatives. How do you engage the citizens to let them know about it, train them on these initiatives? How does the library interact with people in the U.S.?
Well, we're lucky to come to this in partnership with some of the other innovative agencies who've been doing this work before. So the Smithsonian has an amazing transcription program, and so does the National Archives. And there's a whole community of people who are interested in doing volunteer work from the comfort of their own home. And we engage with them on social media, and there are various ways that we can help them. What people are really motivated by is a sense that they're giving back. And also they're motivated by their own learning objectives. So connecting them to curators who are working in that field and understanding what their work is useful for. We can, for the first time, get transcriptions of collections, which are amazingly powerful. So cataloging helps you find out what an item is about, right? So this book is about 21st century France, and that's not something that you can get from the transcription of the book. But what the transcription gets you is fidelity of detail. So for the first time, we have this historic newspaper collection that we've digitized in OCR, and you can search on your home address. And so I live on Capitol Hill in this old Victorian, and I found the building permits that were filed at the turn of the century because I can search on that specific search string. That kind of research wasn't possible before. And if we think about what we can do with historic handwritten manuscript collections, searching on people's names, things that we couldn't really do at scale before, it's really exciting.
Talk to us about Elsie. Who is Elsie?
Who is Elsie?
Elsie the robot?
Oh, Elsie for Robots, yeah. So we just launched a new webpage that we call Elsie for Robots, and it gives a list of all of our APIs that people can use and bulk data sources. So if people want to make things or want to do some text analysis. This is a good tool for them to use. And we've also done making some tutorials and some tutorials and some walkthroughs. But also we highlight people's projects who have used the application programmer interfaces. So we're hoping that'll inspire people to make more things. But please check it out, because there's lots of really good resources on there. And share it with your programmer friends.
You have another thing coming up. The deadline is in April for the Congressional Data Challenge. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think so. Our idea in LC Labs about making so. We're really interested in exploring what digital collections make possible that weren't possible in the tangible world. So one of the things that is possible now are making like maps at scale based on geocoding of information in the collections, or doing text analysis to derive new knowledge that you can do without a huge amount of data. So we want to encourage people to experiment in this way and then share their work with others. So the Congressional Data Challenge is a great example of that. As Congress's library, we have Congress.gov. We provide that service that help people track and understand the legislative process and legislation. And a lot of that data is available in bulk. And so what we'd like for people to do is use that bulk data to make something, to help us understand the legislative process in a new way, or do a mashup between that and another data source. And then we'll feature those winners. There's a $5,000 prize for the winner, and a $1,000 prize for best high school project, and some honorable mentions for some fun categories. So if you know people who might be interested in this, please do share it.
Definitely, because data just in and of itself is useless, right? It's just clutter until you do something with it. And one of the other things the library is doing, you have a very interesting, the innovator in residence that you have in there right now is doing some interesting things with data, right? To help people engage with it.
Yeah, so we have Jer Thorpe is with us. He's a data artist who's based in New York, and he's done some work for cultural heritage organizations before. And I think what Jer has really been, it's been just great having him here. He's helped us understand our data in new ways. Brought a fresh perspective. He's actually doing a podcast about it, so please take a look at listen to his podcast. You can look at it, but that won't really do much good. So one of the things he's done is done some text analysis on our bibliographic records. So we have these millions of cataloging records about our assets at the library, and he's done some interesting text analysis and applications that can sit on top of that, so you can explore what names were possible. What names were popular on a certain time slice of the data, that's something that you couldn't really experience, like walking through the card catalog with your fingers or even searching online. So it's been really exciting. But we post about his work on our blog, The Signal, blogs.loc.gov/The Signal. And we also tweet about it at @LC_labs. So if you're interested in following his work, it's been really fun.
I think around the country, particularly at local libraries, a lot of them, back when I was in local news, I used to hear this all the time from library directors, that libraries, more important maybe than any other aspect of society, have to embrace the digital age, right? They won't survive unless they move forward. So I feel like the Library of Congress, and certainly from our discussion here, is certainly embraced that, is moving forward with gusto. What advice do you have for the other government employees, the other agencies in the room here, about trying to make that leap to the digital age? What are some of the lessons you've learned? What's some advice you can give them?
Well, I think that libraries in general have really worked together to do this. And, I've gone through from the crisis of confidence in libraries, like what will libraries be with the digital when the books are going away? And I'm really glad to not be having that conversation anymore. Like millennials are huge library users. Libraries are more popular than ever before. But it has been hard. It has been a long, hard slog to get here. And what has worked for us is iteration. So user-centered design, lean product design, trying things, testing them, small-scale experiments, seeing how they work, and then putting them into production. I think what has not worked for us are, big, trying to do multi-million-dollar big bang projects. Those are, I think everybody in this room has been through this before, right? So that's one of the reasons we started LC Labs, was to have a small, agile group that could pilot things and put them into production. And I think it's both economically less risky in terms of your you risk less in terms of like your budget, but also it helps with culture change. So people can experience small innovative projects in ways that make them understand the realities of it, and I think that's been really helpful.
Yeah. And you know the whole purpose of the summit, why we're here today, is to talk about that customer experience. So how has the library wrapped its head around that, right? The library was a place where you came to us, right? And so you had to abide by the way that the library did things, and people adjusted, right? As a child, I learned the Dewey Decimal System. I didn't go in and say, I wish you organized things this way.
Right.
But that's not the way we live today, right? When people come to you digitally, they say, no, I expect you to adjust to me. How's the library adjusted to that?
That's so fascinating. So that's really true. And people's expectation of how to find and use information has changed because they find and use information in other sources, right? So they expect a Google-like interface, and that is not historically what libraries have provided. We've provided, many of you have used online journal searching in your undergraduate times and done Boolean searches and things like that. So as technology has changed, and customer expectations have changed, we've had to use, modern ways of engaging with our customers in terms of focus grouping and surveying, but also engaging directly. And so one of the interesting things about the web is that it has broken that traditional patron-librarian relationship. That relationship used to be very personal and intimate, and the web has separated that in ways that are good and bad. I think the good, because it has democratized the information. It's very easy. Anybody can come and use the prints and photographs collection. That was true before, but you don't have to take a plane flight now to the Library of Congress to come see them. You can just go on your phone. So what we have to do is be much more intentional. We have to be friendly and inviting. Not to say that we weren't friendly and inviting before, but much more intentional about it. Be on social media. Be talking to people. I think that's been the challenge.
I've got a couple more, but do we have any questions from the audience here as we get toward the end?
I see some LC folks in the audience, so if things get hard, I'm just going to throw it over to them.
So, you're talking about engaging more and being more open. How does the library use social media to engage with citizenry?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't characterize it as being more open. I'd characterize it as being open in different ways. We use social media very heavily. A lot of our special collections, like our Maps division, have their very own Twitter account, which they can use to talk with people. Our blogs have been enormously popular. One of my favorite blogs, I can't remember the name of it, but one of my favorite blogs highlights the research that people have done using the collections material. And there are some really interesting and fascinating stories that come with that. But we've really found that gives people a sense of, that closes the distance and makes the place feel more welcoming, which is one of our key goals right now.
Have you, or maybe not you personally, but the library, learned anything from engaging with the citizens, either more generally, or if you could think of a specific example where somebody came to you and just went, here's lightning in a bottle?
Gosh, yeah, all the time. So we engage with people who are using the APIs to make things, and they give us a sense of what works for them and what doesn't. So a great example of this is we have Laura Rubel with us, who's a software development librarian from George Washington University. She's in residence with us during her research leave, and she made this really amazing app that explores the palettes of different collections of the Library of Congress. So check it out on the blog. It's really neat. So what she does is pick the dominant colors out of some of the collections and show them as a palette. So for example, we have this historic baseball card collection, and you can see what the palette is on those historic baseball cards. And so she was using the API to do that, and she came across with some data inconsistencies and some things that we could fix. And that was just like amazing. But also we have a bunch of open source projects, and what I really love about open source is it kind of blurs this line between government and citizen. It's like we're all on the same team. We're collaborating together to make something. So I mentioned before the historic newspaper collection. The web application that we use to serve those newspapers is open source software and has been implemented in other libraries who have then contributed back to the project. So I think that's an important role for us, which is building things that can be used by other libraries and by citizens.
Excellent. You mentioned as things are coming into the APIs, they're not always organized necessarily the way they should be. And libraries, they live and die on organization, right? I saw the twinkle in your eye before when you were talking about cataloging things. So how do you deal with that tagging issue? Because the lack of standards in tagging and dirty data, as somebody who wrestles with large data sets all the time, can be the bane of your existence. Has the library found an easy way around that?
So there's always this tension between, that's not a tension. I would say that there's a spectrum of ways that we can make data useful. And cataloging is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with cataloging. You probably use card catalogs or your local online catalog for your library, but that data is highly structured, made by professionals, and that is at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum are the comments we get on our Flickr, on the Flickr images that we have, which are, like, this looks like my grandfather's diner. And his name was Toby. And so someone has to take a look at that and determine whether or not they're going to put that in the collection, in the catalog, which happens a lot. So along that continuum, you also have transcriptions and tagging. So wouldn't it be useful to have the entire prints and photographs collection of the Library of Congress? You could search it and find all the elephants, for example. So that's sort of the tagging. And how restrictive do you make that? I think that's something that we have to work iteratively on. So I know at the National Archives, they don't put any restrictions on how you can tag things. So one of the things they find is that professors tag for classes. So, like Kate Zord's CS 100 class. And I'll say to my students, go look at all the things on the National Archives that are tagged with my tag. That's going to be our reading for next week. So that gives a lot of freedom, but on the other side, that's not very usable for other users.
Right.
So there's
if you don't have that base taxonomy, at some point, somebody's going to spell things differently, and how do you write all that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to comb through your collections regularly, especially what you're intaking, and just are you constantly cleaning them? Do you have a bot like a Roomba that cleans up your taxonomy?
That would be great. We constantly add and update our metadata as. One of the neat things about computation is that it can expose errors at scale. So you can take a look at, you can run an analysis on how many times we've called this Arkansas versus Arkansas. I mean, that's not a mistake that our catalogers would make, but just to give an example, that wasn't possible before without computation. So,
final question. How, as a citizen, do I know if the library cares, right? So you don't want to see a photo of my sandwich from lunch necessarily, but you, as you mentioned before, you would care if I found some letters from my great-grandmother to Abraham Lincoln or something like that. That's an obvious use case. Where's the line? If I'm the average person, how do I know I'm not just wasting your time?
Mm. Well, first I'd like to say, please come. Just come and use our services. Just get a reader's card, do some research there, use the website, find out what we have. That'll give you a really good sense of what we're collecting and what the parameters are. I think our librarian, Dr. Carla Hayden, is really interested in engaging with the American public and really wants people to feel like this is their library. I mean, it's the Library of Congress, but it's really America's library as well. So getting a sense of what the collection is like is, I think, the best way to do that, and then to make a phone call.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate, and please help me thank you.